Hey everyone, welcome to the Recruitment Show. We are talking about all of the major topics that people are discussing right now. Everything recruiting, future of work, and everything in between. I've got guests from all over the world to come and share their perspective and their thoughts and feelings and all of that stuff on these key topics. It might not be politically correct. It might not be what you want to hear, but it's people's perspectives, and it's important to hear people's perspectives. I love storytelling, and I think one story can illuminate a million more and really increase our understanding of these topics. So sit back, whether you're watching live or after, grab a drink, take a seat, and enjoy.
Thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to the show. And today I have Susie Phillips-Baker, all the way from Harrogate. Well, actually from Dublin, then Harrogate. Susie, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Lovely to be here.
Thank you. Maybe just to give some context, do you want to give me a little give us an overview of kind of what you do and where you're at, and then we can talk about occupational psychology, recruiting, and all of that cool stuff.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of what I do right now, so my role is program lead for our Masters in Business Psychology at Arden University. So it's an online university primarily. We do have some sites around the country, around the UK. So my role is looking after the program. So, kind of developing modules, supporting students, business development, marketing, that kind of thing. So very varied, but my background is quite a practitioner background. So although this is kind of an academic role and an academic setting, so working in a university, I would kind of really identify as more of a practitioner. So my background is as an occupational psychologist. And I guess I've had a bit of a kind of a career that's gone kind of like, in various different directions. Yeah, exactly. So I've got lots of different experience to draw on, which is really helpful, particularly for occupational psychology. So I guess I'll just say what that is, really, just to kind of explain what that is. Yeah.
Occupational psychology. Yeah. Enlighten us.
Exactly. Yeah. Because often people haven't heard about it. They think, what is this thing called business psychology? Because you might have heard of a clinical psychologist or maybe an educational psychologist. So occupational is one of the strands of psychology. So what we're interested in is understanding people and how people interact with organizations. And often in organizations, you put structures and processes in place, and then people come in and kind of mess those up a little bit. They get a bit complicated. We are quite complicated beings, and when we're put together, we can often cause, issues. So I love people, but I know that there's issues there. Love that.
I read a really interesting book recently called Tribe by Sebastian Juncker, and one of the things he was saying actually was that we're way better in small groups, like 100, maybe 200 folks. How does that relate to, because you have these huge organizations of hundreds of thousands of people, and then you have all of these different SMEs, and what do you what's your view on?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was at a talk last night from a neuroscientist, and she mentioned that we can only know, I think, 150 people. So there's something about the kind of human brain, about connections and how much we can kind of hold. She compared us with elephants who can apparently know hundreds and hundreds. It's really fascinating. Yeah. I don't know the kind of neuroscience behind it, the brain. I'm not a neuroscientist, but yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I think that's kind of something about how our brains actually, our neurons kind of fire off each other. So how we can connect with each other, but slightly different. But yeah, in terms of organizations, definitely, our kind of social connections are really important. And when we're working in teams, we obviously have a very strong influence from others. So you've heard the term culture, organizational culture. That's a really strong influence on how we behave in work. We talk about culture as the way we do things around here. So you'll know if you walk into an organization what kind of culture it has. You get a feel.
Just like
yeah, you get it. Well, yourself, if you worked in an organization, you kind of get a sense of that culture. So that might be, the way, the kind of norms, and as humans, I guess we kind of we take on some of those norms, and we often get influenced by that, I guess. And I think that can be quite different if we're working in a large corporate that has very kind of strong historical norms built up, compared to maybe a like you said, an SME or kind of a new business that's only kind of getting off the ground. And so the other thing that's just striking me as well is that sometimes when you have businesses that are growing, so you've got a small business that's turning into a bigger business, that can cause some issues at that point, because you need to put more processes in place, you need to put more structures in place, and sometimes that can impact on people, and people can find that a bit difficult to deal with.
It's interesting because, with smaller firms, people like the fluidity and sometimes the freedom, and sometimes there's also this unstructured feeling you get. And suddenly when you put processes and structures and stuff, it very much changes things.
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm referring to. I think that does kind of have an impact on people, and it can sometimes create some anxieties. And I think, when you talk about change, any type of change in organizations, that's where issues can come in for people, is because they feel concerned. They're not sure what's going to happen. It's going to impact on them. They don't know how. And I've seen the grief cycle applied to organizational change. So the understanding of kind of how we deal with grief, and the kind of confusion, uncertainty, frustration, the different feelings that we get, that can actually be applied to the organizational change experience. And that, people do worry, and part of the role of an organizational psychologist is to kind of think about some of those things in advance and to put in place some of the support mechanisms, recognizing that people might feel like that. So how do we communicate things early on? How do we support people when we know that they're going to feel concerned or confused? And I think, the role of, human resources often is around the kind of processes and procedures, structures, which is really important, but also we can't forget about the people. I think that's probably
the company's made up of its people, right?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Just on culture, what is your your broad definition and review on it?
Yeah, well, definition wise, I would say it's the way we do things around here. That's for me is a really nice kind of succinct way of just saying, that's it's about the kind of beliefs, about, it's usually quite kind of deeply held kind of beliefs as well. And the other thing we talk about in relation to that is climate, so organizational climate, and that's people's perceptions of that. Yeah, so that's the kind of perceptions of the day-to-day kind of, beliefs in the organization. And, that can have a strong influence on people's behavior. And also values come into that as well. So what's important? What do we value in this organization? What are the things that we really care about? And that influences our behavior quite strongly as well.
It's interesting because I see organizations and they communicate their values and this is what our culture is like and things like that. But they're often it's different when you actually experience it, or you speak with folks and they joined a firm and it's quite different from what they thought it might be or the way it was communicated. And there's often a little bit of a disconnect between what firm thinks its culture is like versus what it is actually. The other interesting thing I think with larger companies is that there's probably multiple cultures within a big firm, I would argue, because your experience is governed most closely by who you work with, like your team, maybe your immediate team. There's obviously culture set from the top and it stems down. But if you're working, let's say with your line manager and the immediate team of 8 or 10 people, that could be very different and a very different experience to someone else that's working in a different department and so forth. What do you?
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, sorry. No, I do. I definitely agree with that. And I think, it can depend on the role as well, doesn't it? So, there's some roles where you kind of have the type of activity that you're doing kind of breeds a certain culture, behaviors, so the kind of the way that people approach things or how they approach their, even the kind of, like you say, the communication, how they communicate with each other. If you prefer to use kind of emails, or if we're quite formal with how we do things, or if we're quite relaxed.
Yeah.
And then, what you do when you go into a business is you kind of get a sense of that, and you try and kind of assimilate, essentially into the culture. You try and get on with people. There's some link there as well to kind of bias, and that's a bit of a kind of an issue for recruitment, obviously, in terms of thinking about we want people to
bias in what way?
Yeah, so we want to recruit people in the likeness of ourselves because we want them to get on in this place. We want a good fit. We want people who are going to fit. But the danger is then we recruit in the likeness of ourselves. So it's like a similar to me bias where you basically, you connect with somebody and you think this person, has got a lot in common with me, and you get on with them, and it's easy, and so you kind of like them, and that means that you might be more positive towards them in an interview, for example, and that might mean that they are more likely to be successful. But the danger is then that we're kind of building on that, and we're not ever kind of including the diversity. So an area that I'm really passionate about in my work is diversity, in particular neurodiversity. So thinking differently, and how do people encourage differences in thinking, because actually the evidence says that leads to better success, better outcomes, actually business outcomes as well, so commercial success, rather than all being the same.
A lot to unpack there. I love that. Let's do it. Okay. I think if we go to your initial comment is interesting. It's essentially, like hiring based on fit or cultural fit or corporate values can limit diversity in the hiring process. I think is essentially what you said, which I actually agree with, because as you said, the danger is you end up with people that are similar, right? And there's pros and cons to that, of course, but so many companies do that, and a lot of feedback I get, interesting, when we're hiring, is I'm not sure they fit. And you're like, well, what does that mean? And it's just a feeling someone has, right? Like, because a lot of recruiting is subjective, right? I mean, we're human, we're biased, by nature, right? Like, what can you do? I mean, you can be aware of your bias, great. And you can maybe in an interview process, love to hear your thoughts on this, but, you can kind of, well, what are we looking for? What's important? What are the key things? I love looking at human skills, potential. There's some hard skills you need for particular jobs. So, you can be thoughtful with what we're looking for. You can be also, thoughtful with the group who's interviewing and all agreeing on what is it that we're hiring for. Because otherwise you end up with people saying, I'm not really sure they fit, and they're a job hopper, or they've missed this and that, all these kind of subjective things you get. So I think it's interesting. What would you suggest that people do to minimize, maybe minimize or just open up the talent pool?
Yeah, well, you've kind of alluded to quite a few of the areas there. So one of the key areas is thinking about what is it we're actually asking here. So what is it we're trying to find out about this person? And because the subjectivity can often come in when it's not clear what we're assessing against. So one of the areas where I worked was with the College of Policing in recruitment and selection. So we developed the assessment processes for police officers and staff at all levels, so entry level up to the highest level. And we would use assessment centres to do that, develop exercises and activities that are linked to the role. So that's quite key, that we're assessing people based on, kind of relevant tasks.
So you're just going there though, based on just raw skills, like no human stuff. It's
no, competencies as well. So behaviours and thinking about what they're going to actively be doing. I don't mean just actually doing as in tasks. I mean doing as in behaviours as well. So obviously, think about teamwork is quite an important one. Thinking about kind of customer service type skills as well. So, working with the public. How do we assess those in a way that's fair? So one of the things that we would have done would be not use any police related scenarios. So we're not, in that case, advantaging anybody who has that prior knowledge and experience. So we're actually widening the pool a little bit there, because sometimes recruiters will look for people who've done that job already. So we'll sometimes look at a CV and go, oh, great, they've done what we want them to do here. Let's take them. But actually...
Wow, so much. sorry to interrupt you.
No, not
So often, obviously, depending on which job whatever job you're hiring for, right? I mean, some require previous experience, of course, but a lot of the time, hiring manager will feel very comfortable hiring someone that's done the job before or been in a similar firm. Because I think a lot of it, you know, like you don't want to take a perceived risk on someone, you know, emotionally, psychologically, whatever you must say. It's if you're hiring, you don't want to make a bad hire. You don't want your line manager to say, hold on a sec, why did you take this person from, you know, they weren't even doing the same job. They were from a random industry. And so I think it's, I would say actually from my experience that I think hiring managers find it difficult to, you know, to go outside of the pedigree. I like to call it pedigree, like it's someone from a similar firm and similar company. I think they almost need permission from their line manager to say, look, it's okay. We don't need someone from our industry. And you know, just to kind of get a general consensus, I think that could be really useful.
Yeah, and you know, that's completely understandable because it's expensive. You know, it's expensive to hire people and expensive to make a mistake because you've trained somebody up and 6 months later you discover they're not right for the role. So that's obviously an expensive mistake depending on the level that you're recruiting at. So it's completely understandable, but I think it's just that kind of early and kind of good preparation and kind of trying to really get a really good understanding of what the job entails and what it is you're looking for, what type of person. You know, we sometimes see values-based recruitment. So going back to what we were talking about earlier around the values and the good fit. It's not just about a fit as in, you know, I like this person, but actually are their values a good fit for the values of the organization? So that could be useful to incorporate as well. So, you know, bringing in some of those values into the recruitment process can be quite useful.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's sometimes hard to, I mean, for me, like, I think a lot of it comes down to empathy, you know, like, I mean, and also even culture. For me, it's about people caring about each other and supporting each other and being there for each other. And you know, so if you end up hiring some, you know, a lot of, if you go hard on empathy, or even, you know, maybe even flowing on from that kindness, I think you're on to a good start. It's very difficult to measure in an interview process those things.
Yeah, that's really true. So kindness is actually one of the values of Arden, ironically. And, you know, we do get that question in interviews from candidates. So they'll say, you know, these are your values. Can you tell me your experience of that? Which I love. I think that's a great question. So for any candidates out there, I really like that. I like that they ask, you know, what do you think about the organization? What's your experience been? And that puts the interviewer on the spot. Because I also like to say that, you know, it's a two-way process. So the candidate is being interviewed, but so is the interviewer. The interviewer is also on the spot, you know, representing the organization. And ideally you want to create a process where everybody, you know, does their best and has a positive experience. So even candidates who aren't successful feel like it was a good use of their time. They maybe learned something from it. They get good feedback afterwards. And going back to something you were talking about earlier, which is around the if somebody goes into the job and thinks, oh, hang on, this isn't what I thought it was. We talk about realistic job previews as quite an important part of recruitment as well. And particularly for...
What is that exactly?
Yeah, so talk about that. Yeah, absolutely. So particularly for kind of larger scale recruitment, it's quite useful. So it's about really just giving the candidates a genuine understanding of what the role involves. So not over painting the picture as, you know, overly positive, selling all the benefits, obviously, which is fab, and that's what organizations do. But they don't sometimes put in, you know, some of the requirements that, you know, are realistic. So, for example, working patterns, you know, things that the organization knows are a kind of non-negotiable. You know, we have core hours. We do expect everybody to be there during those. You will be working on your own for, you know, X amount of the time, but you'll, you know, rather than kind of trying to appeal to everybody, it's actually about saying this is what the job entails. But, you know, maybe including some testimonials from current staff about what they like about the job, just to kind of give a bit more information, really, rather than having a rosy kind of picture.
Oh, I love that. It's so important to communicate what it's really like because for me, the trick about recruiting is finding the right person for the right job. Like there's a spot for everyone, I like to think, on the planet, and it's about finding the right place for you and hiring the right people for your organization. I think like we look at Twitter or X now, Elon Musk, and how he communicated a few months ago, I thought was really interesting, because he was saying, hey, if you want to come work here, it's 24/7. If you're not up for it, go find another job, kind of thing. Very stark, or even there's so much conversation about remote work and hybrid or in the office. And at the moment you're seeing a variety, some companies are saying they need to be in 5 days a week. Some are saying it's fully remote, or some are saying you can come in 3 days. Whatever it is, I love your approach on it, because you just say it up front, and you're going to end up attracting people that it suits, because not everywhere suits everyone, and I think it's a really good approach.
Yeah, and I think it's about that kind of the negotiables, because for some people there's certain things that are negotiable and certain things that aren't. You're going to go into a job going, I absolutely, need the flexibility on a Friday. I need to have, that day where I can be around for whatever reason, childcare or whatever else. There's something that you maybe feel like I just need this. And as long as the organization can give that to you, you can give it back in other ways. And I think that's something that's really useful to think about as well, is that kind of, it's a psychological contract we talk about in occupational psychology. It's like the unwritten kind of agreement that you have with an organization of the things that you are willing to give them your services. Obviously you get paid. That's your reward, your extrinsic reward, your financial reward, but there's other rewards as well. And sometimes the balance gets tipped too much, where people think, oh, I'm giving too much here and I'm not getting enough back. But then sometimes the organization can bring it back by just adding in something extra that's helpful to them, that they really need.
Yeah, I love that. It's the organization. Also, I quite like it to think of it as well as the individual. Like it's, if I'm hiring someone and I have this unwritten, unspoken thing to your point of, like we're in it together. Like I'm here for you. I want you to do well. I'm going to do all I can for you. And you kind of, you expect the same in return, right? And so, and I think a lot of the time you have this classic, people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses, this classic kind of thing. And for me, it's so true, like a amount of people that we speak with on a daily basis about work, careers, happiness, why they're looking to leave, or why they're so happy in their current role. And so much of it is these personal relationships, like if you feel that someone's with you, like doing it, then you're just, I think you find that you're way more happy. And also, I've also just to prove that, I've spent my career trying to headhunt people from companies, right? Like calling them up and trying to convince them to move to another company. And happy people are way harder to move, like fact, right? Fact. And let me tell you, like money, I mean, it's up there somewhere, but it's not top of the list. I always find it's like, well, why are you happy? Well, I'm really happy in this job. And well, what is it that makes you so happy? And so much of it is the personal relationship stuff. It's the line manager's awesome. The team are brilliant. And therefore the culture's great because they're really enjoying the work and stuff like that. And so I think to your point, it's so important on all levels.
Yeah. And it's like the push and the pull factors as well, isn't it? Where it's like, there's not enough of a push, so therefore there needs to be a real pull. So then what is that pull going to be? So, okay, it's not going to be money, maybe it might be working participation, progression, exactly, values, there's lots of other things you can do. Yeah, but it is that kind of like, it's a fine balance. I think people don't feel that motivated when they're happy. So quite content, I don't really want to rock the boat. I know this organization, I'm comfortable here.
It's hard to leave. It's like the hooks are in. I'm like, actually, I'm really happy. Now, if there's a nice promotion and, there's nowhere to go in your current firm and, and along with that comes, of course, with promotion comes more financial reward and stuff. Great. But the hardest thing for people in an environment where they're actually really happy, but they do want to progress is the social interaction stuff. It's like losing all of the goodwill and relationships that they've built up. Well, they think they'll lose them. You actually won't, because
I was going to say, you'll stay in touch with people. you
stay in touch.
Keep,
yeah. And also the amount of, and it also really interestingly, I speak with people and it's just like, well, why did you make the move you made, or well, what happened there? And so many people follow people as well. I just, I loved working with Susie. She was awesome. She went to the firm and, I heard she was hiring, and I was like, right, can I come work for you again? Can I come work with you again, or whatever it was? So there's many interesting kind of aspects to this.
Definitely. And I would say most of my work, I was self-employed for quite a few years, and most of my work, if not all, came from people I'd worked with. So it was all contacts, it was people who you kind of build a relationship, a reputation with, and who then recommend you. So those relationships are really key. And the other thing I wanted to add into that as well is that research talks a lot about meaning in careers, and about meaning kind of being so important to career decisions. So actually happiness is kind of like an outcome almost of different factors that you have, so the social support but I think one of those influencing things is getting meaning from what you do. You actually feel like you get that sense of satisfaction that what you're doing is important, or it has some impact. And then the kind of reverse of that, exactly, or just the reverse of that is that you're not getting any meaning from your work, and therefore it doesn't really motivate you as much.
And I think also, just if I think about what you said right at the beginning, and you tried different things, and I think also it's because a lot of people that listening to this and looking at social media, a lot of people talk about got to find a job that you're happy in, you've got to find a job that you love, and I think it's important, but there's also many people that struggle to, and I think just trying different things is a good thing, like, because I think back at kind of school, and everyone's like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like it's just set up as in, like, I need to know at that age what I want to do for the rest of my life almost. And I think it doesn't work like that. I think people have 3 careers in their lives now or something, and it's fine to try stuff. And it might take you a while, find this, this meaning, this happiness, or whatever you call it. And I think that's normal. It's normal to try things.
Yeah, totally. And there's different transitions in our lives. One of my PhD research was on the motherhood penalty, so the impact of motherhood on careers. So looking at that kind of impact of, different career points based on the kind of, having children and the factors that influence people's decisions. And I think there's other, career points as well. When I was working in the College of Policing, one of the areas I worked in was coaching police officers who were due to retire. They retire really early, so kind of 55 for some.
Right.
So actually, you're talking about retirement at the age of 55. They're obviously going to have another career, or hopefully one, maybe.
Have to, I mean.
So yeah, well, exactly. Nowadays you do have to. We're going to work until God knows what age.
100.
So yeah, exactly. So yeah, definitely the kind of transitions. A lot of our students on our course are, working, are thinking about career change as well. So they're, in their 40s, 50s. We've even got, one of our students in their 60s, and who is, just really getting so much from it and thinking all the different things that they could do.
Love that. I love that. I want to just to pivot a little. I hear a lot of people talking now. All these conversations I have are like private, confidential conversations about work and things like this. And I'm hearing a lot at the moment around people not feeling so comfortable really sharing their views and having difficult conversations about difficult topics in work. There's this for fear of being cancelled, for fear of, it just seems to be a little kind of, as they call it, like an overtone under whatever, of just kind of fear and of a little bit of just caution about really sharing. And then that's against the backdrop of, please bring your authentic self to work. What are your kind of thoughts on that, and just, being able to have conversations, and because, you have conversations and you want to understand, and, we're talking about having a wonderful, diverse, neurodiverse companies, and with it brings people with different perspective, views of the world, all these different things. And what a wonderful place to learn. right? And be curious about people. Any advice to people on how to kind of navigate that environment, if you agree with me? I mean, that's my perspective on it. I don't know what you're seeing, but
Yeah, I definitely see there's challenges for people to, you talk about bringing your authentic self to work. There's a narrative, I guess, around kind of being open. Maybe there's kind of generational differences, I guess, in the workplace today about what you would say, in an interview situation. Back in, my early career, I would never have asked about the kind of working patterns or anything, because it just wasn't done. You just wouldn't ask about flexible working or anything like that. Whereas now it's standard. You'd say, can I have every Friday off, or I want to work this and that's what I want to work. That's acceptable. Whereas I don't think 20 years ago it was really done.
You couldn't have left the office before your boss left the office 20 years ago, I think.
I mean, my husband told me a story about when, somebody was sent home for wearing brown shoes because there was like the boss hated, the look of the brown shoes. It was like, that's not professional at all. There was so much etiquette involved in the workplace that we don't really see today. And some of that's great. Some of that's fantastic. I definitely think there's some downsides to that as well, in terms of, some of the kind of flexibility of our work means that like younger people coming into the workplace don't get the experience of understanding our workplace and kind of, taking on some of that knowledge and information that we just naturally did when we started work. You just kind of did, pick it up. Whereas if you're working remotely, I think you're at a disadvantage, frankly. Yeah, it's really hard. And it works really well for me because I'm, I've got teenage children. I'm set up here. I can work from home. That's fine. During COVID, I'm sure everyone has loads of anecdotes, but I was coaching social work leaders, and one of my coachees was in the bathroom for a coaching session because the only place you could actually get some peace and quiet, which is not conducive to good working environment, but that was the reality for some people, was that just didn't have space. Sorry, I've digressed slightly from your question. So remind me again. But
I think it's interesting. I think and also there's just one thing. I think you're happy, you're comfortable at home because you know what you're doing. I think I agree with you. When you're younger, you want to learn from people. You want to listen to your boss, and you often learn more from them than you might do from the actual job itself. My kind of like question, I guess, was just around people want to learn and understand others, and there's a feeling, I think, of just people aren't so comfortable now really sharing their thoughts or having these meaningful conversations with colleagues. The fear of saying the wrong thing, for someone taking it the wrong way, the fear of being cancelled, or just, like people sometimes aren't quite sure what to say, how to say things. And is there any kind of advice you'd give if you'd indeed agree with that? Because that's what I'm hearing. People that, just want to have conversation with people, want to build meaningful relationships with people at work, like them.
Yes. Sorry. So that was around kind of, for me, that's kind of like sensitivity. And, there's a sense, I guess, that people are in some situations overly sensitive to offending or, saying the wrong thing. I think, part of that does come from the kind of hybrid kind of working from home, being yourself. Whereas, like you say, when you go in, you kind of put your glad rags on, you go into the office, you put on a bit of a persona. We don't do that when we're at home. So maybe there is a kind of a challenge for our heads to think, I'm in work mode now. So maybe we do kind of drop our barriers a little bit in terms of kind of behavior. Coming from, say, for example, the perspective of neurodiversity and thinking about whether people feel comfortable to disclose, it's an area I feel, in my working life, very comfortable to speak about. I can't really talk so much about the cancel culture or that kind of side of things. But I think definitely organizations to have a responsibility to help people to feel comfortable. So to create what we call psychological safety, which you've probably heard about because it's really trendy kind of in the last couple of years term. So that's really just about kind of trust. So do we feel that we can trust each other? Do we feel safe in our working environment? And I think there's
that's for companies to almost organize the right environment for people to have these conversations.
Yeah, and that's about clarity. I think it's about, people need to have an understanding of what's expected of them. They need to know what's appropriate. Sometimes it takes something to go wrong for people to go, that isn't appropriate, and to draw the line. But I think organizations have responsibility to be relatively clear about that from the outset. So what is appropriate behavior, without being overly nannying in terms of saying, you can't do this, you can't do this, because we're adults. We should be treated as adults. So I do strongly believe that an organization who doesn't trust its employees is not going to create a good sense of trust back from the employees. So you do have to give and take. So the organization does have to trust people, but equally does have to be clear about what's appropriate, because people can get it wrong sometimes. And also I think that we don't want to live in a culture where if we get it wrong, it's the end of the world. Sometimes things are really bad. Sometimes things do go wrong. And how do we deal with that? I guess that's the other thing. How do organizations deal with when it goes wrong? Sensitively.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And also, I think maybe just to come full circle, it also really comes back to me to like the types of people that you're recruiting into your organization. And if you talked about kindness being one of your values, like if you're able to, to hire nice, kind, empathetic people, then actually, you're setting yourself up for success, and you should have a good group of folks that are happy to share, have conversations and things like that. And I think then also you're hiring the right folks and you're going to give them your trust off the bat. And it's just a really nice position to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you said it earlier about the getting the right person to the right place. And there's a place for all of us. So, for those people who don't resonate with that and, are, motivated in other ways and want to do, obviously, hopefully we all want to be kind to each other. But if we, want to work in an environment where we can really, kind of progress and, we're really motivated by, financial rewards, we really want to set ourselves up well for the future, that there's, the environment enables that. It's about that kind of getting the right fit. So the recruitment process includes that, and is clear about what the job entails, but also asks the right questions of the individual as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because you've got so many, there's some stark contrasts to it. It's like investment banking is again quite a good example, because it's typically, certainly it's portrayed as, long hours, it's high pay, it's pressured and things like that. And you're kind of like, if you know that, you're like, right, do you know what? Yeah, I want to spend the next 10 years of my life doing that. Great. And then it's for some people, it's not for others. And so I think also to one of your earlier points around, when you're hiring, decide what you want, like what you need, get everyone agreed on it, and communicate it honestly with whoever you're interviewing. Let them interview you. And then you just give yourself a much better chance of making the right hire.
Yeah, definitely. And, communication is a really important part of that, giving candidates information in advance as well to let them know, so they're not feeling kind of surprised by what they're being asked, that they know. There's, some research I just read recently that said that candidates perform better when they understand the criteria that's being asked. So they actually perform better in those interviews where the criteria is clear in the question. So what they're hearing and what they're being asked, they know what the interview is getting at. It's not those tricksy questions where it's like, I'm going to ask you this question and you don't know why I'm asking you. That's not that helpful.
Make them feel, make them feel at ease, and you're going to actually really find out what people are like. If someone feels comfortable in your interview, they're more likely to open up, share their views and things like that. It's really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And also self-selection is part of that. So people can self-select out, they think this isn't really the right place for me. Like, it just doesn't feel like a good fit. They can say that as well. So it's not just the interviewer making the decision, it's the candidate making a decision as well, that they don't then in 6 months' time go, oh, I really didn't make the right decision. They know that early on.
Yeah, love that. Susie, that's a good place to end, I think. Thank you so much for joining me. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for watching, listening, all of that stuff, and see you all very soon.
Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do not forget to subscribe in all the usual places: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you like to watch or listen to a podcast. Any comments or feedback, please drop us a DM. If you've got anything that you want us to discuss, again, feel free to get in touch.